Hi, my name is Ciarra, and I'm a sophomore political science major at Kennesaw State University. This semester, I've been researching the role that private prisons play in the American justice system and the support and authority given to them. So first, let's take a step back and start here. The United States of America holds about 4% of the world's population, and yet we make up for 25% of the world's prisoners. That means 800 out of every 100,000 Americans are in prison. Nelson Mandela said that no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its jails. A nation should not be judged based off of how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones. So in coming here today, I thought about how much I knew America. The first thing I can recall about prisons is a game I used to play at recess in 3rd grade. There'd be the policemen on one side of the playground and the bad guys on another. The object of the game was to get to base before a policeman could catch you. This game could seem quite simple right off the bat. But back then, I knew nothing about the American prison system. But I understood that jail was bad, that it was never a place that I wanted to go. And that's why I ran so fast to base every day at recess. Now I can understand what you guys are all thinking. Of course you knew jail was bad. Everyone should know jail is bad. At the time, if you asked 3rd grade Ciarra, I would quite literally tell you jail is for bad guys. But now that I'm older, I don't think I could say the same. Imagine a 3rd grade Ciarra understood racial bias, and that a black person is 10 times more likely to be incarcerated for committing the same crime as a white person. Imagine a 3rd grade Ciarra understood the immigration system, and that Immigration and Customs Enforcement has a quota of containing 34,000 immigrants a day. Imagine a 3rd grade Ciarra understood mental illness, and that it's 3 times more likely that individuals with severe mental illness will end up in a prison than in a mental health facility. Maybe everyone in prison isn't necessarily the bad guy. That isn't me saying that prisons are filled purely with American citizens who are guilty of no legitimate crimes and have been placed there unfairly due to bias and discrimination in the system. This is me acknowledging that it happens. Take from that what you will, and then understand that criminals undergo a federal system that is flawed. But there's an and to that story. In 1983, 3 businessmen by the name of Thomas Beasley, Dr. R. Krantz, and T. Don Hudo started the Corrections Corporations of America, the world's first privately owned prison company. These are facilities that are for-profit companies that contract their prisons with national and state governments. As of 2015, these companies held 7% of the state prisoners, 18% of federal prisons, and 75% of immigration detainees. Okay, so people own prisons. They seem to be fairly operable because there's somewhat significant percentage of people in them. People own grocery stores and gas stations, hair salons, food chains, banks, churches, and everything else in America, so why couldn't they own prisons? Now let's talk. When talking about private prisons, you must first have a firm understanding that they work exactly as what they are, a business. If you own a daycare facility, your market is parents who need care for their children. If suddenly people stop having kids or stop wanting to put them to daycare facilities, your business begins to tank. You have the children to hold in your daycare facility and therefore lose money because you are not making enough to balance out the cost of running. Maybe you would go as far as to lobby for certain political groups that would enforce childcare by a certain age or promote childcare programming. The same idea works for private incarceration systems. They need prisoners to maintain a profitable business. If the crime rate decreases, private prisons, like the Corrections Corporation of America, lose their business. The CCA and businesses like it lobby for groups like ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, that push for more draconian criminal laws in order to push policy and increase their influx of prisoners. It is argued that private entities, regardless of their build, are substantially more efficient and can be more flexible in response to correctional needs, as they're not restricted by guidelines and are open to a free market of opportunity and competition, strictly based off of how well they operate. The government contracts with these prisons because in certain cases, they are run more cost efficiently. On the per day, per prisoner basis, in max security prisons, it is more cost effective to hold prisoners in private prisons. So yeah, privately owned prisons may operate as a business, but it's an efficient one that probably saves taxpayers and government money. Compare this with the issue of mass incarceration. CCA corporations are lobbying in political groups to come down harder on prisoners to increase incarceration. The ICE has a quota of 34,000 immigrants a day, 75% of which are going into private prisons. The contracts the CCA have with ICE and other government agencies is what is called an occupancy guarantee. If certain numbers of prisoners aren't occupied in the prison, the government must pay a fine. Now attach this with issues concerning safety and violence in CCA facilities. In 1998, the Justice Department investigates a CCA prison in Ohio after numerous escapes, stabbings, and killings. In 2004, the Federal Department of Justice finds a disturbing degree of abuse and underreporting and neglect in CCA prisons. In the story of a reporter by the name Shane Bauer, who went undercover to report the life of a private prison guard, he reported having been in the middle of multiple stabbings and riots, as there was a 1 to 120 ratio of guards to prisoners. In the story of a reporter by the name Shane Bauer, who went undercover to report the life of a private prison guard, he reported having been in the middle of multiple stabbings and riots, as there was a 1 to 120 ratio of guards to prisoners. He also reported on behalf of a prisoner named Robert Scott, who contracted gangrene in the prison after health services dismissed his complaint of severe pain in his hands and feet. He was given Motrin and sore pads for his pain. These are just a few of the stories of some safety and security concerns encountered in private prisons. However, I don't want to mislead you by thinking that this only happens in private prisons. Saying stuff like "don't drop the soap" and other stigmas that come along with the prison experience ensure me that neither experience is one that ensures the maximum amount of safety for its prisoners or their guards. There are issues. We must acknowledge that they happen. But with all of this comes the question that I'm asking all of you. What do you think should be done about private prisons in America? I couldn't leave the show without giving you my personal opinion about the topic. There's an unbelievable amount of bias and corruption and violence in the prison system, period. That is regardless of whether or not you're in a state, federal, or privately owned prison institution. I believe that our entire justice system genuinely needs reform. However, I don't think that businessmen who profit off of mass incarceration in any way benefit this already in need of help system. I believe that violence that occurs in privately owned prisons is a special case due to the fact that they are not as regulated by the government. I think we live in an extremely capitalistic country, and that unfortunately even people have price tags. I think that the CCA facilities have a large role to play in mass incarceration, especially in regard to immigration detainees. As much reform as there needs to be in the prison system, I don't think it needs to include private prisons. I don't think the economic benefit is worth the ethical cost of continuing to have private prisons in America. Private prisons need to be less for profit and more for people. For those of you who disagree with my opinion, that's fine, because at the end of the day, that is all I have for now, is an opinion. I encourage all of you to create your own opinions, whether you have faith in the system or whether you do not. I encourage you to let this speech be a path to lead you into further investigation about private prisons, so that you can understand what is happening to your fellow citizens in our country. I encourage you to think about the ways in which you would like to see reform, and write your state and local representatives about it. Let them know whom you want to fight for and what you want them to fight for. I think that there's a mutual understanding amongst people on both sides, and anywhere in between, that regardless of how the justice system needs to be fixed, that it needs fixing. Be the change you wish to see in this world. Start now, start here. Thank you for listening.